For those of you in relationships, do you agree with the statement that opposites attract? Now, I would say, what kinds of opposites are we talking about? My wife and I are very different in a lot of beautiful ways, and yes, there's that mutual attraction because she has something I don't and vice versa. But there's other things where opposites do not seem to attract, at least not in a way that binds them together. There are some opposites that seem to drive us apart, and opposite faith perspectives is one of those. I want to talk about mixed faith marriages, and that can be somewhat difficult, especially if any of you are in a mixed faith marriage that didn't begin that way. With more and more people struggling in their faith and some deciding to leave the faith, what does that mean if my spouse decides to leave and yet I am firm in the faith, unshaken, grounded in the gospel? Well, now I'm in a mixed faith marriage and I didn't intend for that to happen. What do I do now? I don't know of a better revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants than section 74 to give us some things to think about. Not clear answers, because there aren't any, but some things to think about as we move forward in a marriage that didn't turn out the way we had intended. Or, again, perhaps you began marriage in a mixed orientation marriage, hoping it wouldn't remain that way and that you'd be able to convert your spouse. That often happens. It often doesn't. So what do I do in that situation? Well, for this, turn to section 74 and notice what is being described. The interesting thing about this one is section 74 is simply an explanation of 1 Corinthians 7:14. And 1 Corinthians 7:14 is often used as a verse to justify infant baptism. So how on earth do you get mixed faith marriages out of an infant baptism verse? Well, it was never intended as an infant baptism verse. That's how. But listen how it goes. 1 Corinthians 7:14, or you want to look at it here, section 74, verse 1, it's identical. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy. Now it's the last phrases that some churches seem to think have to do with infant baptism. It's the first half of that verse that, in my mind at least, suggests mixed faith marriages. Now, where's that ending coming from? How on earth do you get infant baptism from that? Okay, there's something about unbelieving husbands and believing wives, or vice versa, unbelieving wives, believing husbands. They have children. Are those children unclean? Are they holy? How does this work? Now, for context, keep reading in section 74. Verse 2, 3, and 4 explain what Paul was talking about. It says, Now in the days of the apostles, the law of circumcision was had among all the Jews who believed not the gospel of Jesus Christ. Right? The old law of Moses is fulfilled in the gospel of Jesus Christ, but those Jews that have not converted to Christianity, who have not accepted Jesus as the Messiah of the Jews, they're still performing circumcision as the sign, the token of the covenant with Abraham. Okay, this is an old thing. This goes back to Genesis 17. Okay. But then notice this. It came to pass that there arose a great contention among the people concerning the law of circumcision. For the unbelieving husband, in other words, the Jew that did not convert to Christianity, was desirous that his children should be circumcised and become subject to the law of Moses. But from the mom's perspective, from the Christian convert's perspective, that law was fulfilled. We don't have to do that anymore. In fact, it's not just unnecessary. Is it leaving a message that we think we still have to perform all those works of the law of Moses? Is that some kind of evidence that we doubt the gospel of Jesus Christ? This was a bigger deal than just, are we going to do this or not? Okay? He goes on, it came to pass that the children, being brought up in subjection to the law of Moses, gave heed to the traditions of their fathers, their unbelieving fathers, and believed not the gospel of Christ, wherein they became unholy. Now that helps us understand some of the original context behind what Paul's dealing with. Jewish converts, Jewish non-converts, Jews and Gentiles, mixed faith marriages. Timothy is one of these, by the way. Timothy, as in 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, as in bishop of one of the early churches. His mom was a believer. His dad was not. What do we do here? And if you have a Christian parent and a Jewish parent, the holidays might be interesting. We celebrating Christmas or Hanukkah or both? That's one thing. That's an easy compromise. But circumcision, you either do it or you don't. And it speaks volumes about your identity. Who am I? Am I a Jew that is reflecting the token of the Abrahamic covenant? Or am I a Christian that knows that that part of the law has been done away in Christ? What do we do? Now, the way it's described here and in Corinthians, if the child is circumcised against the wishes of the believing parent, does that leave the child unholy? Now do you see where infant baptism might come onto the scene if people are wondering, oh, well, does that mean little children are unholy? And the only way that they can become holy is through covenants that they have to enter into? Well, baptism's the covenant for us. And so, yes, if that's an unholy child, so you get this? It's not just original sin. It's not just inheritance from Adam. There is a sense if children are unholy for whatever reason, then they're going to have baptism to cleanse them. Now, we're going to lay that to the side because, as we're taught here, little children are holy. Moroni chapter 9 is another great place to study that, okay? We're trying to be crystal clear on this. Now, to understand what's going on with mixed faith marriages, though, notice some of the details that we just saw in verses 2 through 4. Did you catch when it said a great contention arose? That can often be the case in a mixed faith marriage. I remember reading a book once that talked about in places of high diversity and high devotion, be careful. In religious terms, if you have high diversity and low devotion, no problem. We disagree, but we don't care about our disagreements. If you have high devotion and low diversity, no problem. We feel passionately about things. Good thing we agree with each other. If it's low devotion and low diversity, who cares? We don't care about anything, and we're a lot alike anyway in our not caring. But when they're both high, tinderbox, powder keg, we are different and we feel passionately about our differences. And when that's the case in a relationship, in a marriage, and neither side is going to budge, then yes, great contention tends to arise. What do we do? Now, there's another word that I think gives us a hint. It talked about the traditions of their fathers. That's worth wrestling with. Is this doctrine we're fighting over, or is this tradition that we don't see eye to eye on? Maybe the two of you, if you really discuss things, what matters to either party? Why does it matter? How much does it matter? Are some of these things mere traditions that you could give on, as opposed to others that are, no, bedrock doctrines I can't afford to give any wiggle room? Now, again, that doesn't solve all the problems, because sometimes it is solid doctrines on both sides that we're arguing over. But it is worth deciding and determining what is tradition and what is gospel truth. By the way, through it all, I love the fact that in this revelation, the Lord clarifies, I will honor the best intentions and hopes of the believing parent. If you just can't compromise on this, if you can't see eye to eye, and if a child is caught in the crosshairs, that you're tugging, that it's a tug of war and the child is the rope, for their sake, first, can we avoid contention? Can we seek ways to compromise, especially if it's doctrine versus tradition in some cases? But even in cases where it's doctrine versus doctrine and the unbeliever will not budge, that doesn't make your children unholy. God will honor your side of things. Because as he says at the beginning of that verse, the believing spouse sanctifies the unbelieving one. It's almost like that truth and conviction is the trump card, and God will honor it, especially for the child's sake. There's a little more here if you look at verse 5 through 7. Wherefore, for this cause the apostle wrote unto the church, giving unto them a commandment, notice this, not of the Lord, but of himself. That's important to clarify, and Paul himself clarifies it. Okay, so this is coming from me. This is my best advice to you, but take it for what it's worth. This is not on the tablets of stone. This is not thus saith the Lord. This is thus adviseth and counseleth Paul. Okay? But here's the advice, that a believer should not be united to an unbeliever. So as far as I'm concerned, if there's any way to avoid a mixed faith marriage, all the better. Although he gives an exception, except the law of Moses should be done away among them. So if you are going to enter into a mixed faith marriage, can you decide which side trumps the other side? And again, this is best case scenario, right? It doesn't always work that way. But as far as Paul's advice is concerned, can you decide, you know what, as we enter this marriage, I really do want my children baptized. And we can decide on other things. We can compromise on stuff. I'm not going to force you to come to church, but it would mean the world to me if the child can be raised within the gospel of Jesus Christ. Paul goes on, that their children might remain without circumcision. That would clarify things. We're on the Lord's side on this one. We're not doing this as a nod to ancient Judaism. That the tradition might be done away, which saith that little children are unholy, for it was had among the Jews. But little children are holy, being sanctified through the atonement of Jesus Christ. That's interesting. Why am I so against circumcision? Especially in our day when circumcision, there's no problem. The child can be circumcised in the church, outside the church, Jewish, non-Jewish. It's more of a health matter than a religious matter. But what's interesting in this case, if we're circumcising our child because the thought is that they're unholy, I don't agree with that doctrine. Because of what Jesus Christ did, children are alive in Christ. He gives them these unaccountable years so they can grow up in faith and learn accountability. He's giving us as parents time to raise them. What a blessing that they are saved from Jesus, or by Jesus. What a blessing that they are saved by Jesus. To understand this, again, put it in our perspective, is it better to avoid difficult situations? Yes. But even if you're going to move forward despite that, can we clarify some things from the start? Why do you feel so passionately about this versus why do I feel so passionately about that? What are the premises underneath our conclusions? Maybe that's a chance to come to a better understanding of why we have different perspectives on these things, okay? What's the truth that's informing it all? Now, remember what we saw also. Paul, this is just advice. It's not a commandment. So, do we have to avoid mixed faith marriages? No. But it does make things easier. Now, what if I started with a same faith and now it's a mixed faith? What do I do? Well, for this, go back to 1 Corinthians. Because in 1 Corinthians 7, what Paul is giving here is only half the advice. It would be easier not to go that route. But he also says this in verse 12 and 13. 1 Corinthians 7, 12 and 13. If any brother hath a wife that believeth not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman which hath an husband that believeth not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. I love that's the opposite version. I mean, if everything else is being equal, easier not to have a mixed orientation marriage, or not to have a mixed faith marriage. But if you're in one and you have other things in common besides religion, if you love each other and want to remain together, by all means, do. I love that Paul is leaving this up to the discretion of each couple. What's practical? What's best to keep peace? What's going to be best for the children? How are you going to navigate all of this? Are you willing to work through the issues because you see the value of the relationship you have? Then do it by all means. Now he adds in verse 15 of 1 Corinthians 7, but if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God hath called us to peace. And that does seem to be the real issue. Peace through it all. Avoid the great contention. If you want to stay together, great, do. If someone refuses to do that, or it's just a level of incompatibility that breaks things down, then I'm not forcing you to stay. I'm not forcing you to go. This is going to be up to you. Between you and the Lord, pray about this. Decide how to move forward. But can we at least establish some ground rules first? Can we seek peace? Can we decide what's tradition versus truth? Can we eliminate contention from the get-go? Can we look for other areas of compatibility? You understand what I'm saying? Can we explore the beliefs behind the practices? What are the thought processes? Can we have non-contentious doctrinal discussions? Can we at least decide that our children are holy and should be treated as such? Like I said earlier, at the end of the day, what seems to matter most for God are the kids, the children. And the fact that He will bless them according to the faith of the faithful parent, what a relief. Like I said, Timothy, I'm looking at you. And to any of the Timothys that are growing up in the church currently, like him, they may end up even stronger as a result of what you're going through. So you believing spouses, keep believing. And you will sanctify those around you.